Portland Community College is the largest college in Oregon and has a proven reputation of being progressive and responsive to its students and the communities it serves. Its criminal justice degree program is viewed as one of the best degree programs in the United States. In an unprecedented action, Portland Community College's Criminal Justice Department sponsored a citizens panel on police use of force and accountability. Professor Aaron T. Olson produced and moderated the event, which took place in the auditorium of the Moriarty Arts and Humanities Building on the Cascade campus at Portland Community College. The purpose of the panel presentation was to promote education, awareness, and responsible action on this controversial topic, which is relevant to all people in the city of Portland, the state of Oregon, and the United States of America. Panel topics included a synopsis of Oregon's revised statute on physical force and deadly physical force, a synopsis of the United States Supreme Court decisions of Tennessee v. Garner and Graham v. Connor, the excessive force definition by the International Association of Chiefs of Police, an assessment of the Portland Police Bureau's patterns and practices, annual performance evaluations, citizen review committees, how to hold the police accountable, and what action can be taken. The following representatives were personally invited to appear and participate on this panel. Dr. T. Allen Bethel, President of the Albina Ministerial Alliance. Joanne Bowman, Chair of the Mass Media Committee, Albina Ministerial Alliance Coalition for Justice and Police Reform, former Oregon State Representative. T.J. Browning, Chair of the Portland Police Bureau Advisory Committee. David Fedanke, Executive Director of the American Civil Liberties Union of Oregon. Dr. Leroy Haynes, Vice President of the Albina Ministerial Alliance and Chair of the Albina Ministerial Alliance Coalition for Justice and Police Reform. Skipper Osborne, CEO of Truth and Justice for All, former President of the Portland chapter of the NAACP. Each panelist was asked to respond to 7 questions on this important panel topic. Points of view expressed in this video do not represent the official position of Portland Community College. We now join our moderator, Professor Olson, as he reads the first question to our panel.
The question is, please provide us a background of your education and experience on police officer use of force and accountability issues. Why are you on this panel? What do you hope is accomplished as a result of this panel? And if you could respond within 2 minutes, please.
That's a lot to respond to in 2 minutes. But first of all, I don't have any formal education when it comes down to talking about experience with police officers' use of force and accountability issues. But however, for over the last 5+ years more, we've been involved in it, and even more than that when we go back to some other states. But I'll borrow from Dr. John Perkins when he began down in Mississippi to want to form a health clinic, and they asked him, do you have any medical experience of being a doctor? And he said, no, but I do have enough sense to see that something's wrong and something needs to be done about it. So I do have enough sense to see that there is some systemic problems in the Portland Police Bureau and something needs to be done about them. I am on this panel to help bring awareness to the fact that there is some systemic problems and that we need the community to begin to stand up, step up, speak up, and say enough is enough about these things and help make some changes. What do I hope to be accomplished out of this is that when you leave this room, you will have more information in which to make a very educated decision about on the which way you will stand. That which you can support, will you support it? And that you're against, just be against it. But let your voice be counted. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Ms. Bowman.
That was extremely efficient, sir.
And under 2 minutes.
I share the fact that the formal education that I have as it relates to Portland Police is what I've observed as a member of the community. My office up until recently was on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, and for the 20 years that I've actually worked in that area, I've witnessed people being treated differently by Portland police officers. I've been formally involved in actually trying to hold Portland Police accountable since 2004, which started with the Kendra James killing by Portland Police. Since then, I've been very active consistently on addressing issues of racial profiling, police accountability as it relates to how they treat kids in Northeast Portland as compared to Southwest Portland. Why am I on this panel? Because education is power, and I'm here to remind people that we get the police force that we demand. And if we accept a police force that's fearful of community members, then we get what we've been getting. But our expectations should be much, much higher. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll hear from Ms. Browning.
My name's T.J. Browning. I have a bachelor's degree in business administration, but during the course of getting that degree, I encountered this incredibly interesting and intelligent professor, Gibbons. And you know, when you get a good professor, you take everything they have to offer. So I ended up with enough credits to get a minor in criminal justice, not knowing at the time what the heck I was going to do with that. However, it served very, very useful to me. So my advice to you is if you find somebody interesting, take everything they've got. And it's funny that we have that same background. During college, I was doing prison reform work, teaching down in the legal processes class in the prison. It's a waste of time, money, and life. But anyway, moved on to victims issues, incest, child abuse. And then in January 17th, 1992, Nathan Thomas, a 12-year-old boy, was taken hostage in my neighborhood and shot and killed by the Portland police. And that changed my direction with my criminal justice. I went on to chair the mayor's task force on police accountability that Joanne served on and contributed a lot to, I may add. I was on the first sitting Citizens Review Committee, the CRC, for about the first year and a half until 5 of us resigned and blew it up because they would not let us hear the Mejia Poot case, which was a travesty. Then I went on to do the oral boards, who you hire is critical to your police force. The promotion boards, who you promote is critical. And Chiefs Forum, and now I chair the Bureau Advisory Committee, and this is a citizens committee that is supposedly speaking for the citizens, and I'm always looking for members. So anybody interested, please come. Why I'm on this panel, I noticed at the CRC, which handles complaints of citizens against officers, probably 98% of those complaints were based on unrealized expectations from either side or both sides of the party. The police think you say something, this is how you're supposed to respond. The citizen thinks, I'm not doing anything wrong, why do I need to respond this way? Expectations from both sides lead to problems. And I've always felt the more that we understand those expectations, the fewer problems we'll have. So I'm hoping that you all get that knowledge. And I have to just say exactly ditto, 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 what I hope to accomplish. You get the bureau you deserve. If you are not willing to get involved, you deserve it.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. And that microphone is for that table there. And Mr. Fidanki, if we could hear from you, please.
Well, I guess it's going to be unanimous. I also do not have any formal police training. My background was in journalism. I'm a recovering broadcast journalist. Something you never quite get over. I think I'm on step 3 of the 12-step program for recovering journalists. I've been on the staff of the ACLU of Oregon since 1982. I became its executive director in 1993. I have worked on a number of police issues over that time span. I think Joanne was being humble when she said she'd been working on racial profiling issues since, I think she said 2004. I remember working with her on that issue back in 1997 when she was in the legislature. And I've been working on racial profiling issues since 1991, and those problems continue, so I can't take too much pride in the work that I've done, but I think we have made a difference. As far as the use of force, ACLU feels very strongly that the amount of force that should be used is only that which is absolutely necessary in a given situation. And we'll get into talking more details about that. And I hope that all of us will know more about these topics when we leave here this evening than we came in with.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. And Dr. Haynes.
Thank you very much for organizing this panel and the community participation. I too bring no formal degree education to the issue, but I bring over 40 years of civil rights advocacy on this issue. I was one of the organizers of the Civilian Review Board that is instituted in Dallas, Texas. Although I serve as diversity training for the Dallas Police Department in Dallas, Texas. Since I've been in Portland, I have been one of the major advocates in the Byron Hammock killing, the Kendra James killing, the James Jahar Perez killing, the James Chassie killing, and the recent Aaron Campbell killing. I have been an advocate participant in bringing proposals, many of the present laws and reform that has taken us 10 years. Have been through the activities of the Albina Ministerial Alliance, and we continue to bring that reform mechanism to bring the concept of community policing into a reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Osborne.
Thank you. My name is Skip Osborne. I have a degree in business administration from Lewis and Clark College, a Bachelor of Science. I have 3 years towards a Master of Divinity from George Fox University, and I went 2 years for a paralegal degree at the College of Legal Arts. What I have, for the last 15 years, I have worked under, well, I shouldn't say, real quietly with Mike Shrunk, the head DA of Multnomah County, in reference to police use of force. I also worked with Chief Croker on the Hammock murder back in the day, and also worked on the Kendra James, James Perez, and the Chassie case. What I hope this panel accomplish, and I'm quite sure it will, is to inform the people of the use of force and lack of accountability to the Portland police officers. They are here to protect us, not to kill us. And we have to be, and I'm tired of the news media making citizens look like they're stupid in what's going on. And when we begin to look at the Oregon Revised Statutes and the U.S. Constitution on what use of force really means, then you make the choice and do not allow someone, just because they have a law degree or an officer, determine the definition of that. You have a voice. And so I'm on this panel to get you more informed. Thank you.
All right. As indicated in the program, we have some time dedicated to have a synopsis of the different laws and looking at some of the court decisions. And we're going to take some time right now and look at these different laws. Particularly when it comes to physical force and deadly physical force, Tennessee versus Garner, Graham versus Connor, the excessive force definition by the International Association of Chiefs of Police. You can look at these online by going to Oregon.gov, scrolling down on the bottom of the home page, and click on ORS, and it'll take you to these specific references that I'm talking about. For the use of physical force, it says, a peace officer is justified in using physical force upon another person only when and to the extent that the peace officer reasonably believes it necessary to make an arrest or to prevent the escape from custody of an arrested person unless the peace officer knows that the arrest is unlawful, or 2, for self-defense or defend a third person from what the peace officer reasonably believes to be the use or imminent use of physical force while making or attempting to make an arrest or while preventing or attempting to prevent an escape. Use of deadly physical force, ORS 161-239. It says, notwithstanding the provisions of ORS 161-235, a peace officer may use deadly force only when the peace officer reasonably believes that. And I want you to make a note about that word reasonably, because we're going to be spending a lot of time on that this evening and hearing that from the panel members. A, it says the crime committed by the person was a felony or an attempt to commit a felony involving the use or threatened imminent use of physical force against a person, or B, the crime committed by the person was kidnapping, arson, escape in the first degree, burglary in the first degree, or any attempt to commit such a crime, or C, regardless of the particular offense which is the subject of the arrest or attempt to escape, the use of deadly physical force is necessary to defend the peace officer or another person from the use or threatened imminent use of deadly physical force, or D, the crime committed by the person was a felony or an attempt to commit a felony, and under the totality of the circumstances existing at the time and place, the use of such force is necessary, or the officer's life or personal safety is endangered in the particular circumstances involved. Nothing in subsection 1 of this section constitutes justification for reckless or criminally negligent conduct by a peace officer amounting to an offense against or with respect to innocent persons whom the peace officer is not seeking to arrest or retain in custody. That's what the Oregon Revised Statute says. It's there. You can view it. Now, a landmark U.S. Supreme Court decision, Tennessee versus Garner, 1985. The incident happened in Memphis, Tennessee in 1974. 11 years later, the U.S. Supreme Court makes a decision on this, and this is what the court said. The court specified the conditions under which deadly force could be used in the apprehension of suspected felons. Deadly force is justified by the police if the suspect poses a threat of serious physical harm either to the officer or to others. Make a note of this. It's not believe, it's not think, it's not being afraid. Look at the demonstrative criteria here. The justices said if the suspect threatens the officer with a weapon or there is probable cause to believe that he has committed a crime involving the infliction or threatened infliction of serious physical harm, deadly physical force may be used if necessary to prevent escape and if, where feasible, some warning has been given. The court established the standard of objective reasonableness in Graham versus Garner, 1989. It evaluated from the perspective of a reasonable officer on the scene and not with the benefit of 20/20 hindsight. The justices said the calculus of reasonableness must embody allowance for the fact that police officers are often forced to make split-second judgments in circumstances that are tense, uncertain, and rapidly evolving about the amount of force that is necessary in a particular situation. That's what the justices said. Now we're going to hear from the panel members in looking at what we just heard here. But before we do that, we're going to look at one last definition, and that's the definition of excessive force by the IACP. And they say, excessive force as the application of an amount and or frequency of force greater than that required to complete compliance from a willing or unwilling subject. That's what the International Association of Chiefs of Police says about excessive force. So now, here's question 2, and this is going to be directed to our panel members. And we're going to be hearing from Dr. Bethel here very soon. The question is, based on the U.S. Supreme Court's decisions, the Oregon Revised Statutes, and the definition of excessive force, was the deadly force used on Aaron Campbell by Officer Ronald Freshour of the Portland Police Bureau reasonable or unreasonable on January the 29th, 2010, and why? And we'll save the U.S. Department of Justice question later. Please.
Unreasonable. 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 There was breakdown in communication. Aaron Campbell had come out of the apartment. He had already surrendered. He had his hands laced behind his head. Then he was shot 5 times by a beanbag. Dog released. And then Officer Freshour shoots him in the back. I believe that it was totally unreasonable in the use of force that he used. I believe that the scene was escalated by officers and presence that came, and because of that, we ended up with the death of a person, even with others agreeing afterwards saying that it should not have happened. So I believe it was very unreasonable use of force at that time.
Thank you. And I'm going to do a follow-up question to you, Doctor, in regards to the U.S. Department of Justice investigating this shooting incident. And this is under the authority of the U.S. Code, Title 18 and Title 14, that gives the DOJ the authority to investigate this incident. What's your comments on that? Is it needed?
Yes, it is needed because we need some outside eyes to begin to take a look at what's happening within the Portland Police Bureau to see if there was any civil rights violated in this case. Commissioner Salzman said he didn't feel that there would be any violations found, and we believe that we need to escalate or elevate this discussion and investigation beyond the local and the state. It seems like every time one of these officer-involved shootings happen, they feel that the only thing we will do is march, complain, write a letter, talk to the DA, talk to the commissioners, and then we go back into the, and hide again. No, we're going all the way to the federal level. Not only for that, we want to ask, and we are asking and demanding that there is an investigation by the Department of Justice on the United States level into the practices and patterns of the Portland Police Bureau that goes back beyond Aaron Campbell, but goes all the way back and then comes forward and begin to look and see what's the patterns and the practices that's happening within the Bureau.
Very good. Thank you. Appreciate that. Ms. Bowman, same question, please.
So I'll give a short answer to question 2, and my answer is yes. I do believe that excessive force was used in the Aaron Campbell case. But I also want to point out, since I have the mic and 1 minute and 30 seconds left, that it's not the first time that excessive force has been used by Portland police. When you go back to 2003, I said 2004, but it's actually 2003, when Kendra James was killed, the police officers involved knew who she was, knew that there was a bench warrant for her arrest, which means that she didn't show up for a court date. So there was no felony. There was no reason to escalate the situation to the ultimate death of Kendra James. The same is also true if you think about what happened to Jose Mejia Put, another example of someone with mental health issues that if the right intervention had happened, and we have police departments in Oregon that actually know how to de-escalate situations. I think the question that the public keeps asking is how come Portland resorts to deadly force first as compared to a lot of other options that police officers have at their disposal. You can't have it both ways. You can't be well-trained and untrained at the same time. And so we have a lot of work to do to make sure that we have the officers that we should have protecting and serving folks who live in Portland.
All right, thank you. TJ.
I guess I just don't have the faith in the federal government that others do. current U.S. Department of Justice looking into this shooting incident. I guess that's just another, to me, a larger bureaucracy coming from the outside, and I just don't have the faith that they'll actually produce results, since it's my opinion. My opinion is I would really like to see the citizens of Portland let them people know what they want, besides the marching and the organizing, which is a part of it. But every one of you need to start helping us out here. This is our police bureau, this is our community, this is our culture. And I would really, pie in the sky ideas, I would really like us to solve it. And if it means getting a new DA, if it means electing new officials, if it means going door to door and knocking and having the Albina Ministerial Alliance and Joanne and everybody else in this world to get all of you off your butts and doing something, I think that we have a better chance of getting a Portland solution than a federal solution here. That's just my opinion.
Thank you. Mr. Fidanki.
Well, Aaron, you laid out the very, very clearly the definitions under Oregon law and the ones that the U.S. Supreme Court has laid down in case law. And if you look at that language, I'm not a lawyer, and I think anyone looking at that language will read into it what they see in hindsight after a situation happens. The most critical point that I think all of us need to understand here tonight is that the standards of the U.S. Supreme Court provide the minimum that is required to comply with the U.S. Constitution due process clause that no person shall be deprived of life without due process of law. But that is not the maximum that a state or a city can provide in terms of protecting the lives of its citizens against the negligent conduct of their police bureau. To me, it's almost irrelevant whether Officer Frashauer took actions in the Aaron Campbell situation that violated the Oregon use of force statute. The question is, what should be the standard in this community? We have seen time and time again the police bureau commit what should be criminally negligent homicide and should be prohibited under the ordinances of the city of Portland, under the laws of the state of Oregon, and the Constitution of the state of Oregon. When a polluter wrecks a supertanker and damages the environment, our laws allow for that corporation to be criminally prosecuted for the damage it caused through its negligence. Likewise, the Portland Police Bureau has been negligent in protecting the citizens of Portland against unjustified use of deadly force.
Thank you. Dr. Haynes.
The critical question here is one's definition of reasonableness. If there's fear in an officer, many officers consider it's reasonable to take someone's life. Is there a possibility of a future move, a future action? In many cases, similar to Kendra James and J. Hart Perez. But if we look at this particular context of this shooting, one, in terms of Aaron Campbell, there were no hostages, there were no weapons. Aaron Campbell was in compliance. According to the grand jury testimony, he had his hand in the back of his head. He was in compliance. He was obeying the officer's command. A question along with Fleischhauer is why did the officer shoot him 6 times with a beanbag when he was in compliance? Another question is that in terms before the next step of escalation was in terms of the release of the dog. The dog was released. There was no need for the Fleischhauer to fire a shot. The dog reached there and started biting him, but Fleischhauer had already shot from the sniper. Other conflict of witnesses, over a majority of the witnesses said that he did not have anything in his back. Now, it's very clear that if you got 6 shots with a beanbag, you're going to reach to your back. And over half the witnesses, some of them from the same Concordia College, said that they saw nothing being reached for. So obviously, we had a complete breakdown, according to the grand jury, of communication, a breakdown in the command instruction. The very sergeant that's supposed to be in command left the scene to go and talk to another commander. And so you had a breakdown that totally took the necessary life of an individual. Now, there's a difference between Oregon law and Portland Police Bureau policies. There was clear violation of policies of the department on many different areas. And why do we need the Justice Department intervention? Because our bureau and our commissioners have failed to be transparent. They continue to, in the process of hiding evidence, of covering up. And one of the things that the Justice Department is allowed to bring an objective view of transparency, similar to there would be no cleanup of the Los Angeles Police Department until the Justice Department came in. There would be no justice for Medgar Evers after 40 years until the Justice Department came in to Mississippi. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Osborne.
In reference to the shooting of Mr. Aaron Campbell, excessive use of force was used. I want to give you a little synopsis of Tennessee versus Garner. It was alleged that someone was breaking into a house. Officer Hammond went to the scene. Edward Garner stopped at a 6-foot length fence. Using his flashlight, Hammond could see Garner's face and hands and was reasonably sure that Garner was unarmed. Believing that Garner would certainly flee if he made it over the fence, Hammond shot him. The bullet struck Garner in the back of the head. He died shortly after. An ambulance took him to a nearby hospital. $10 and a purse taken from the burglarized house was found on his body. Excessive use of force. And again, I ditto Dr. Haynes. Mr. Campbell's hands were interlocked behind his back. Anybody, any one of you, if you shot in the back with beanbag rounds, your automatic reaction is to reach for where you were shot. And then for Officer Fleischhauer to have his earpiece out and to shoot someone in the back with the AR-15 assault rifle, that is ludicrous. And if that's not excessive use of force, then I do not understand the English language. In reference to the Department of Justice coming in, people are talking about, oh, let the police bureau handle this. Let our culture handle this. I again ditto Dr. Haynes. If the Department of Justice was not allowed to come in the KKK culture back in the 1800s and to bring in federal laws to overrule statutes, black folk will still be in slavery. Thank you.
Thank you. We will continue on with our next question. Question number 3. Do you see an ongoing pattern and practice of excessive force used by Portland's police officers? If so, please list the incidents and the adverse impact, and feel free to identify incidents with other police departments too. Dr. Bethel.
Yes, there is this systemic problem or situation that you can see in the Portland Police Bureau. But when I look at some of the other cases in other cities, I see some of the same things that happen. I can go all the way back to the Stewart case, which was in Boston, Massachusetts, where Mr. Stewart murdered his wife, who was pregnant, drove her from the hospital into the black community, then reported that a black person had killed his wife. And then the police began to go into people's houses, particularly African Americans, throw their furniture out. They were strip searching people on the street. And so it continues. Most recently, I believe at the University of Maryland, there was a young man who was just beaten mercilessly with batons because they said in the reports that he had touched or assaulted the officer riding on the horse. The tape clearly shows he never touched that officer nor the horse, but that they just mercilessly beat him down with batons and took their time at doing it. So we continue to see these things happening. I know we're going to get in later about the road rage, but I certainly believe today, I just saw some security people were in here, that if I took a gun now because I was upset because somebody said something, didn't point it at them, but just held it down to my side, I would not have a paid desk job today. I would be down at the county jail, probably beaten up, locked up, and the book thrown at me with so many different types of, charges that even a lawyer probably couldn't figure it out with a Philadelphia degree. We need some changes because we see the same thing happening over and over and over again. So these patterns are there.
Thank you. Ms. Bowman.
I certainly agree with the doctor that the pattern and practices of Portland police deserve to be spotlighted and changed. Some examples that I'll use are more local examples. You may have heard of the 3 African-American gentlemen who were downtown on a Friday evening. They'd gone to a concert. On their way home from the concert, they go to a parking garage to get in their car. They are stopped by Portland police officers. They are harassed and intimidated at gunpoint. It just so happened that there was a Caucasian couple who put their seats down in their automobile in the garage so they could observe the behavior without being seen by the police officers that were participating in this vile activity. Luckily, the gentleman filed suit, they won, and the city of Portland ended up paying them a 6-figure settlement. That's one. If I had 20 minutes, I could give you 20 stories. I would take one per minute. But the stories that you don't hear about are the ones that happen each and every day in our community. Young people being targeted, harassed, searched, intimidated. I stop 14, 15, and 16-year-old young men in the community and say, well, what happened? I just saw the police stop you. I saw them go through your backpack. Oh, well, they were looking for someone with a backpack like mine with a gun in it. The sheer intimidation, we have young people who have grown up in North and Northeast Portland who expect that to be part of their day-to-day life. That is unacceptable by any standard, and we have the power to change that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Browning.
I'm extremely uncomfortable with this question, and I'm not trying to avoid not answering it, but I'll tell you something. Campbell's death was absolutely tragic, and the other tragedy that day was the officer who actually did what we all wanted. The officer who texted him, the officer that talked to him, the officer that talked him into giving himself up. That officer did exactly what every one of us want a police officer to do, is to de-escalate the situation. And I know his sense of guilt right now and responsibility must be overwhelming. So when I am asked, do I see this pattern, I feel to say yes, I am nailing this officer with the same paintbrush who did exactly what I wanted him to do. What I see is a pattern of unwillingness of City Hall to address these issues. There's no political will. I see a police union that will back their police officers no matter what they do. They're always right. I see a pattern of using the grand jury as, quote, an accountability, when all they can do is look for criminal charges. I see a City Hall that doesn't want civilian review, doesn't want to hear our voices about police. I see definitely patterns here. And the patterns that bother me, besides the ones of the officers that I don't appreciate, are the patterns of the leaders of this community that aren't doing what they should do. Those are the patterns that bother me.
Thank you. Mr. Fidanki.
Well, of course, there's an ongoing pattern and practice of negligence by the Portland Police Bureau and other police departments in the state of Oregon. I think all you have to do is look at the results of some of the use of less lethal force, in particular tasers, that have resulted in unintended deaths to know that that's the case. There have now been 5 unintended deaths related to taser use in Oregon. How many more do we have to have before changes are made in those policies? I think the problem, I think there are a lot of police officers who are not happy with the status quo. We ask a lot of them, and in many cases, they put their lives on the line. I absolutely agree that the officer who was texting Aaron Campbell was doing exactly the thing that all of us would have wanted in that situation. And yet, the death of Aaron Campbell was the end of that incident. How can we prevent these things from happening instead of just seeing them happen again and again and again? I think we have to start at the police academy and the basic training of police officers. We have to start with the policies that are written at the behest of city attorneys and county council, designed to prevent cities and counties from being successfully sued, rather than being written with the idea of giving officers on the street clear direction about what is expected of them, instead of giving them vague carte blanche to do whatever they think is reasonable in any given situation.
Thank you. Dr. Haynes.
I would agree that there is a systemic pattern of not only in the abuse of deadly force and excessive force. At the same time, I would agree that the overwhelming majority of officers carry out their jobs in a professional and ethical and responsible way. Part of this systemic pattern is the failure to weed out bad apples within the police force, to be able to monitor officers who have complaints over and over again, and to be able to weed them out of the system. And then there is a systemic pattern in terms of the training and policies. One of the things most of the public don't realize is that a new training is in place in the Portland Police Bureau, that you are to distance yourself a certain amount of feet. And if anyone go beyond that, you are to shoot to kill. You are to shoot in the mass, not to shoot to wound, but shoot to kill. That is an issue of how vulnerable do an officer get in dealing with a situation. Mijaput, for instance, in a mental hospital, having a weapon but is killed in a mental hospital where mental people supposed to be. Okay, just a total array of common sense that workers in mental hospitals deal with on a daily basis. And so what we have to do is look at those patterns. Now, under Chief Derrick, there was a sense that came out of the Kendra James case of de-escalation. All of that has been thrown out the window under the new administration. We no longer have a concept of community policing under the new administration. And so we're going back to old stuff that has not worked, old stuff that has not led the department to a more perfect union between the community and police. We need the police, but we need responsible, ethical police as well as responsible and ethical citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Osborne.
I have seen, I do see an ongoing pattern and practice of excessive force used by the Portland Police Bureau. And the whole purpose, well, part of the purpose of this symposium is to stop it from happening again. I think about the Stevenson case that happened several years back when an African American was stopping a robbery at the 7-Eleven on, I think it's North Weidler off of MLK. Police officer came up and put him in a chokehold after many witnesses told them, he's not the one. He's not the one. We here in Portland, matter of fact, in Oregon, especially if you're white, if you continue to close your eyes to what is going on in the African American community, trust me, it is going to spread in yours. Even the deaths and the murders by police officers. So after they were repeatedly told that he was not the one, the police officer gathered around so witnesses could not see what was going on. And that was the beginning of the chokehold being used in Portland. He was murdered. He was murdered. Justifiable homicide. As a black man or a white person, any of you should be sick and tired of the words justifiable homicide, because it was not. Now I want to ditto on Miss Browning when she said, City Hall is doing nothing. I'm looking over the audience, and excuse me, but I want to know, is Lynn here and Shannon here from Commissioner Dan Saltzman's office? Now this goes to prove my point. And I want to say this in defense of Portland Community College and TJFA. Dr. James Parks, the director of the Criminal Justice Department here at PCC, he was accused, and TJFA was accused, of doing a setup against Commissioner Saltzman. That is why he's not here. And before I forget, I would like for the news media to go and question Commissioner Saltzman, Mayor Adams. What did you have so important that you could not come to this important meeting? And Commissioner Saltzman, why would you accuse an institution of trying to set you up? And most of all, why would you accuse my organization, TJFA, of trying to set you up? I have more decency than that. And Mr. Parks asked me if I would go to Commissioner Saltzman's office and try to get him to come. So I talked to his chief of staff, Lynn, and I said, no, there is no setup, believe me. I wouldn't do that. And I'm quite sure Portland Community College wouldn't do that. So we got to talking, and then she said, well, let me go look at Commissioner Saltzman's appointment book. So she came back and she said, there's a possibility that he may be able to make it, da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da. I said, okay, that's good. I said, but I need to know because I talked to Professor Olson, and he needs an answer by 11 o'clock on Friday so he can get the brochures out. She said, okay. She called me around 4. Lynn did. And she told me that Commissioner Saltzman would not be here, but she and Shannon, the head of Department of something, but they would be here. So I called Aaron and I said, reserve them a front row seat. I asked them, did they want to sit on the panel in place of Commissioner Saltzman? Lynn told me, no, 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 no. I said, okay. But I never got the question to Shannon. I said, I tell you what, I'll see the 2 seats reserved out of respect to Commissioner Dan Saltzman's office to be there. They are not here today, and I want to know why. And that is what Ms. Browning is talking about. We have a leadership that is refusing to step up to the plate. Now, I would like to ask this question. How many people are running for office that are here? I would like to know. Stand up, if you allow me. Stand up right quick and say your name, right quick. Okay, sit down. Ed, sit down. And just gonna sit down. You see, they found it within their time to be here. And something so vital when you dealing with a death and a murder, and then you talking about the commissioner police can't be here, the mayor cannot be here, and Chief Rosie Sizer cannot be here. Something's wrong, and something has to change.
Thank you, sir. All right, question number 4. Question number 4. Are you concerned about the off-duty conduct of Sergeant Kyle Nice? And as you probably heard through the news today, Sergeant Scott Westerman resigned as the president of the Portland Police Union. And I don't think anyone is going to disagree with his decision. I think he made the right decision considering what's taking place. Both were involved in separate road rage incidents. Do you think Police Commissioner Dan Saltzman's comments about both officers receiving anger management is nothing less than a Band-Aid on a more serious problem of the culture of the Portland Police Bureau?
I should be used by picking up this microphone first by now. Yes, I'm very much concerned about the conduct of the off-duty police officers because they're models. If it was a basketball player who had done that, the NBA commissioner would fine him so much money and kick him out of so many games because they say you are a role model. So we have officers who are supposed to be and dress up in blue and say that they are role models, and yet when it comes down to road rage, which they are supposed to be stopping and preventing, that they would enter into it and then want a pass because they're an off-duty police officer and pull a gun and then not even have to answer any questions about it. Back in the day, he should have been strung up and whipped again and left out there. But I would say, and I would demand from the Chief of Police, Rosie Sizer, as well as Commissioner Dan Saltzman, that they need to get this officer and take some money away from him. Yes, give him some anger management counseling, not only him, but probably a few more others who need that. But that is not a Band-Aid. You see, a Band-Aid is supposed to help bring about healing. There is no Band-Aid that can cover this. There is something that needs to be done, and our City Hall people, our commissioners, our mayor, and our chief of police must begin to discipline these officers in such a way that it sends a message and they know that what would you say today if someone would have robbed a bank and killed a bank teller, and we go down and say, well, let's just give them some anger management counseling and then pay them to set at a job inside of a city building that we pay for, the lights, the heat, the security, and everything, and take care of them. most ridiculous thing you've ever thought of, and this is ridiculous to say that we will do this for an officer and then allow him back on the street. When you can take an officer Freshow, going back to him, who could not even do right with tasing somebody, and now you elevate him to be cover on lethal, somebody is setting up the test. It ain't me.
Thank you. Ms. Bowman.
Thank you. I think that both Sergeant Neese and Sergeant Westerman have illuminated a problem that we don't know how pervasive it is within the Portland Police Bureau. As much as I love Dr. Haynes, I'm going to respectfully disagree with him that most Portland police officers are decent human beings. And I'll say that because I don't know. Since we don't do performance evaluations of police officers, how is it possible to have almost 1,000 employees and not do an annual evaluation? So we don't know who the good police officers are. We don't know who police officers are that need more remedial training, anger management. And I would suspect that every single Portland police officer needs to learn how to de-escalate situations. Something's wrong if the police only response is verbal command and then lethal force. I would suspect, and I have not gone through the training, that there are a lot of levels in between a command and lethal force. And the fact that Portland police officers don't utilize all the tools that they have at their disposal concerns me, because Hillsborough police officers have figured out how to use weapons other than lethal force. Other police law enforcement organizations in the state have figured it out. I think there's an arrogance within the structure of Portland Police Bureau that says, we know what we're doing, leave us alone, and if you question us, it's just because you don't like police. That's the problem.
Thank you. Ms. Browning.
Wow, I always want to respond more to Joanne than your questions. 10 years ago, they started the first civilian review board in Portland. It was a joke. But the very first policy we undertook was a policy of de-escalation. And our elected city auditor at the time, Gary Blackmere, stopped us dead cold in our tracks. So de-escalation is something that's been discussed for a very long time. They also should be peace officers, not law enforcement. Listen, a little bit of just general stuff about the cops. Traditionally speaking, the type of person who wanted to be an old-time cop was a good old boy. We all knew him. He was the schoolyard bully. Mine were the Weldon twins, the biggest red-headed bullies you've ever run into in your life. And of course they became city cops. Okay? They wanted to shoot guns. They wanted to drive their cars fast. Did they have an anger management issue? They live without anger management, okay? Then the advent of community policing came along. And what you started seeing coming to join the police force, and I hope some of you are looking into law enforcement, peace officers, is caregivers. People who actually wanted to serve their community and make the lives better for the citizens of their communities. That's the value of community policing. The value of community policing, my father used to always say, you can't work in the dump and not get the stink on you. If all you're doing is constantly running after bad guys, dealing with bad guys, think your whole life is about bad guys, your whole mission in life is to catch bad guys, guess what? You got so much stink on you, you're never going to get it off. If, on the other hand, you want to serve your community, you want to work with the law-abiding citizens and the decent people to make the place a better place, that means you're going to be talking to real people who care about the community. You're going to be dealing with real people. You know, bring down the level of stink a little bit. We need to get back to community policing. Anger management has no place in, anger has no place in community policing. It's very tough to talk to somebody when you're angry. So that's my pitch for community policing. Let's get the anger level down. Let's get rid of the good old boys and the bullies. Let's put the caregivers back.
Thank you. Mr. Podanki.
Getting this police system is an extension of slave overseers. They're here to enforce obedience.
I
Mr.
actually
Fidanki.
I'm gonna pass on this one. I don't think I have anything to add to what's already been said. I agree with everything that's been said so far.
Thank you. Dr. Haynes?
Yes, in reference to Sergeant Cald and Officer Westerman, I think what it shows is very clearly that police officers or peace officers need to be held accountable because they can be as irresponsible as all other citizens. And that's one of the reasons why we need accountability. That's why we need citizen review. That's why we need subpoena power. That's why we need the grand jury and the district attorney to do their job. We give officers in a democratic society the authority that we don't give anyone else, and that is to take another person's life. They have a license to kill. And one of the reasons why when we look at the rage that happened with Sergeant Cald and Officer Westerman, we see that officers can do wrong and that officers can go off the road, that officers can lose it. And so how do we hold those officers accountable that have the power to take life, the power to use excessive force? And the only way we can do that is through having mechanism to have them accountable, to hold them responsible, that will send a clear-cut message to any officer that you will be held responsible. We're dealing with a culture of the blue. And I believe this. I don't care how much training and how much policy you do, unless we transform the culture within the Portland Police Bureau, we will not change the whole department. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Osborne?
Am I concerned about the off-duty conduct of Sergeant Nice and Sergeant Scott Westerman? Yes, very much so. If that was either one of us out there in the road rage incident, trust me, you're going to go to jail. You're not going to get slapped on your hand. I respect Sergeant Westerman for stepping down as the president of the Portland Police Association. My hat's off to you. Get anger training. Second part of the question, for what Commissioner Saltzman did, giving them anger management, is it a Band-Aid? It's worse than a Band-Aid. I liken it unto me going on the beach in a Speedo and have a pair of Band-Aids on my chest to cover my breast. That's how ludicrous it was, what Dan Saltzman did, and the punishment that they received, a slap on the wrist. It's ludicrous. Gentlemen, what is your name? Riel. Uriel. I agree with your last statement in reference to how the police are operating, basically trying to get us as mummies. I also agree with your statement that I'm trying to get votes. Yes, I am. Because if the people who are running this city refuse to be here at a very important function put on by a very reputable institution, have very reputable leaders in the community sitting on this panel, and they refuse to come, yes, the three people that here deserves the votes.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne. All right, folks, it's important that we stay on program here because this next question is relevant to the problems at hand. And this is a specific issue that affects all of us. The Portland Police Bureau does not conduct annual performance evaluations on their police officers. What dangers exist for the failure of not having this management accountability tool on the employee? I think we know what those dangers are. This is problem solving. What corrective action can be taken to reconcile this void on unchecked police performance? And we'll hear from you, Dr. Haynes.
First of all, the need to be taken from the contracts and from what the city wants and what the community wants and create a criteria by which all of these officers will be evaluated by. And we need to know what the criteria is going to be. Once the criteria is established, then each officer must go through that evaluation period, and if he or she is found to be negligent in any area, they must be able to make corrective action within a limited amount of time, and if they do not make it, then there ought to be some penalties associated with it, that they either lose time, well, no, I don't want them to really lose time. If they don't do it, then they don't have a job. That's what happens to everybody else. If you don't make the improvement, then they just write you another letter and says, you know, it's been nice, and we will pack your desk for you, and we'll send your stuff to you. It is a systemic problem, again, if we don't have any means by which we can evaluate a person to begin to talk about whether we have a good officer or a bad officer, or whether one is lacking training or one needs training. And it leaves too many options for the individual to be able to say when something comes up, well, I haven't had that training yet, or that didn't go far enough. We will know if the person has received enough anger management training by going through an evaluation. If he or she needs it, then we can mandate that they go and get it and not wait until an officer pulls out a gun and say, now I'm going to get even with you because you just did something I didn't like, which tells us something about the mentality of some of the officers that we employ. I don't know about you. I paid a heck of a lot of tax this month, a whole lot. And part of that goes to keeping this city running. And so we must stand up and say, if we employ you, we ought to have a right to fire you. We need an evaluation tool so that we can evaluate them and know exactly where they stand and how we can write a plan to keep them moving. We require it of school children. We require it of nurses. We require it of doctors. You got to go back and get so much more, training and all of that. Why don't we require it of the very people who are supposed to protect us and not allow them to keep going with what we like to call the same old soup warmed over? It gets tasteless, you don't want it, and I don't want what we have in the Portland Police Bureau at this time.
Thank you. Ms. Bowman.
When Jack Dale Collins was killed earlier last month, what we found out was that here was a situation where an officer showed up on site by himself, and we're told that the directive was that he couldn't use anything less than lethal if he didn't have backup. Now, that same evening, on the evening news, we had Sergeant Westerman explaining to us what took place at that park on that afternoon. Ironically, the police officer who actually was involved in the shooting that actually did shoot and kill Mr. Collins didn't speak to anyone for over 72 hours. This is a fundamental flaw with the police union's contract as it now stands. The contract expires June 30th of this year. Several of us on this panel actually went to the first meeting because guess what? It's a public meeting where the police union's contract is negotiated. But the very first question was, who are these people who have no stake in the outcomes of this negotiation? The union representatives refused to actually even have a dialogue because there is people with no vested interest. So when a union contract is written to ensure that all the protection is for the police officers and none of the protection is for the public who they are sworn to protect and serve, we as the people have to change that. And we have the ability to do that by staying informed about when the next meeting is set and then showing up in force so that they know that we do have a stake in what goes into the next police union contract.
Thank you. Ms. Browning.
Okay, here's the Band-Aid answer. This is Saltzman's Band-Aid answer. Okay, it is in their union contract that they don't get annual reviews. What is the possible rationale for not having annual reviews? I have no idea. I have personally contacted 52 jurisdictions in the country. There is not a police bureau I have found that doesn't have annual reviews. And they are shocked that the Portland police officers don't get them. These are cops who don't like that our cops aren't getting them, okay? The way I found out about this is 4 years ago, I had a newly promoted lieutenant walk up to me in front of Central Precinct and said, TJ, I want to manage my people. Now, I had been through the process of promotion process, so I knew he had just become a lieutenant, which is a manager's position. So I said, well, manage. I can't. We're not allowed under union contract to do annual reviews. Would you please do something about that? This started within the Bureau for me. The Bureau Advisory Committee issues an annual report. For 3 years, we've said annual reviews. At the public hearing 2 weeks ago, maybe, Saltzman says, TJ, I've heard this over and over from your committee. We're doing annual reviews. Now, I sent emails out to all these learned people who were smarter than me saying, what exactly did he say? And what does that really mean? Well, they can do annual reviews, but Dan Saltzman doesn't want it in the union contract. He doesn't want it in the union contract negotiation. So what that means is these annual reviews that he's giving to us, the people, cannot be used for discipline, promotion, promotion it can. Discipline, termination, arbitration, lawsuits. They are absolutely worthless. That's a Band-Aid, sir. That's a Band-Aid.
That's insanity.
So what we do to fix this problem, it has to be in the union contract that they do get annual reviews. We all get annual reviews. That's the very first step of accountability. How do we build a record of what these people are doing? But secondly, many of these problems, and I was shocked how many times I saw it on the Supreme Court ruling. The number one priority of the Portland Police Bureau in their policies and procedure is police officer safety. Excuse me? It should be public safety. Public safety is number one. How many times did you see a Supreme Court ruling they could fire if an officer or an innocent person, no, innocent person, citizen, public safety is number one priority. That needs to change.
How can they protect the public if they're dead?
Because it doesn't, I'm sorry, but it doesn't, all police officers are not bad. That doesn't make any sense. How can you, if you are not making sure that someone doesn't hurt you, then how are you going to protect all these people here who somebody has a gun? I'm not saying just go shoot them, but if you don't make sure that he doesn't shoot you, then what about all these other people over here who don't have weapons?
So,
Hey, folks, listen to me, please. Unfortunately, we have time constraints.
But we're the community.
That is true. That is true. Okay. Okay. We need to hear from the other panel members, please. Could we, because we're dealing with a very specific problem. Okay. Sir, could you respect, the protocol here? Because we have panel members who have experience. No.
Yes.
Okay?
Next question.
Could you be respectful? Thank you, TJ. I'd like to hear from Mr. Fidanki because, again, we do have time constraints. And, sir, if you could please be respectful to Mr. Fidanki.
Again, I think we're going to be unanimous on this one, but it's important to have clear, just having annual evaluations without having clear standards for those evaluations is not going to make any difference. And again, I think the issue is one of the culture in the police bureau and the training of all officers. There is, for those of you who reacted against the prior comment about protecting officers' safety, of course we have to protect officer safety in order to protect public safety, but not at the cost of innocent people being killed when there is not a reasonable basis to believe the person was armed. And these are split-second decisions that have to be made. They are not easy decisions. They are not decisions that I would want to have to make. That is why we train police officers to have the latest techniques to deal with these situations. But too often, we are training police officers in a paramilitary style to give verbal commands in a loud voice. We had an incident in Eugene last year of a Chinese student who had just arrived in this country that didn't speak English, that had no idea what the officer was saying, who didn't take any action that was threatening towards the officer, and yet he was tased and could have been killed if the officer hadn't had a taser, because the officer felt the student was going for a weapon underneath his sleeping bag. Had the situation been just a little bit different, that Chinese student would be dead today. That's not a good outcome. And I think what we're trying to get at tonight is what changes can we make that are going to make the outcomes better for everyone, including the officers.
Thank you. Dr. Haynes.
Amen. On the issue of a lack of evaluation, I agree with each of the panel members. But let's be real. The reason that we don't have evaluation is not just because of the union. That's the union job to get as less stringent observation and monitoring as possible for their members. But the reason that we don't have an evaluation is because of the city on the liability issue. They do not want those evaluations to enter into the picture when they go to court on liability issues. That's why we don't have an evaluation, because the city does not push it in the contract negotiation. Secondly, it's the same reason why we don't have drug testing of officers. Why in the world? You can evaluate police departments across this country, and there is drug testing. But why can an officer shoot someone or use excessive force and there is no drug testing when you can't even get a job now without having what? Drug testing before you get the job. It's the issue of the failure of the city to want to cover itself on liability issue at the expense of the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Osborne.
Portland police evaluations are necessary. Any job that we have, you have, 99.99 of the time, you have a performance evaluation in order to be promoted. So why the Portland Police Department does not have one? Again, by the remarks that they made, that is why. Lawsuits. That's the main one, lawsuits. I would like to say this. If I start out stealing candy as a child and I get away with it, I'm going to go steal, when I get older, a six-pack of beer, and I get away with it. I'm going to go rob a bank. I get away with it. But yet and still, there was no check and balance for me to modify my behavior. I look at performance review as an opportunity to be somewhat, not totally, a check and balance of what goes on with our police officers. All of them. There are some good ones, and I'm not denying that. In my notes, a performance report offers a rare chance of a supervisor and subordinate to have time out for a one-on-one discussion of important issues that might not otherwise be addressed. Almost universally, where performance appraisals is conducted properly, both supervisors and subordinates have reported the experience as beneficial and positive. Appraisal offers a valuable opportunity to focus on work activities and goals, to identify and correct existing problems, and to encourage better future performance. Thus, the performance of the whole organization is enhanced. For many employees, an official appraisal interview may be the only time they get to have exclusive, uninterrupted access to their supervisor, said one employee of a large organization after his first formal performance and appraisal. In 20 years of work, that's the first time anyone has ever bothered to sit down and tell me how I'm doing. Now, what dangers exist for the failure of not having this management accountability tool of the Portland Police Bureau? You heard it in the room tonight. Because if the police behavior of certain rogue cops is not put in check, you kind of heard a taste of it from this room. Civil anarchy is next.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Now, updated information. You know this if you're in Portland. On March the 31st this year, the Portland City Council voted unanimously to adopt changes designed to strengthen the city's independent police review division, broadening its power to initiate investigations, issue subpoenas, and send police investigations back for further review. And this is to our panel here. Are you optimistic in these changes? And what unfinished work is there still to do in making police officers accountable for their actions? Dr. Bethel.
I do have some optimism that it is going to help make some changes, but one of the first things that must happen is that we're getting very close to that now, because it was 30 days before this ordinance was to go into effect, is that we must, on that day, put it into effect with all the teeth and power that can be put behind it to make sure it goes forward and do exactly what it is supposed to do. Otherwise, we're just going to go through another exercise of having something on the books. And I believe that this should strengthen the IPR director to begin to take a look at those investigations and make reports back so that we can understand what's going on. And she, or I'm saying she because she is a she at this time, as the IPR director, that the IPR director should not have to ask the police bureau if they can ask a question, if they can be a part of an investigation. They need to be able to have the power to do the investigation without being invited in. I use this term. You can't keep having Fox looking after the fox who's taking the chickens out of the chicken coop. Somebody's got to look out for the chickens. So we can't keep having police looking at police. We need to have some independence looking at that so we can get some non-biased objectives and non-biased opinions and reports back so we'll know how to better handle the situations that we face when certain things come up. For instance, let's just take these road rage cases. Who gets to investigate them? Who gets to make a recommendation? Well, the Bureau says, you can collect your same check, just go sit at a desk. I'd like to have a job like that, where I can just sit at my desk and collect a check. We need this ordinance to be strong, and I hope and I ask that you as community members, voting members, tax-paying people, that you would stand up and say, we need to have this and demand that it stays that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Well said. Well said. Ms. Bowman.
Thank you. I certainly agree that this is a good first step as far as truly reforming the culture and practices of Portland Police. But it is only one part of the reform that's necessary. We anticipate this summer doing a national search for a new police chief. We want to make sure that the community gets to develop the criteria for what a police chief looks like that wants to work here in the city of Portland. They have to have a proven history of actually reforming the culture of a police bureau. Don't just tell us that that's what you want to do, but show us that you've actually been successful in doing it in other locations. In addition to that, we need to have the next legislative session ask the question about what happened with Senate Bill 111, which was a statewide effort to actually review and revise the deadly force statute across the state. So each county supposedly has a group of people who are developing a plan about how police within that county will use deadly force. And so the next legislative session, one of the first questions is, well, what's the plan in Multnomah County? And where is it? And how do we decide whether or not the plan works? The third thing that I think we'll need to do is actually have the next legislative body look at making fundamental changes to the use of force law in the state of Oregon to make sure that it is consistent with the federal law that says, guess what, you actually have to be doing something before deadly force can be used. Those are some things that absolutely have to happen, but the key is for you to stay involved and engage. It matters when regular people show up at city. I just want to say in closing, it really matters when day-to-day regular people show up at city council meetings. For the 2 meetings that it took us to pass this ordinance at the city council, just about every single seat was filled. And it was filled with people that don't normally come to City Hall, so it matters. If you're not there every week, it matters when you show up and make sure your voice is heard. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Browning.
I'm real uncomfortable with first steps. I think it gives the elected officials a chance to say, we did something and stop. I don't like promises of the future. I want it dealt with now. So it makes me uncomfortable. Is there work to be done? You bet. We have a mediation process right now that if a citizen files a complaint and the officer and citizen decides to go to mediation, there's no record of that complaint. None. And they mediate excessive force complaints. Excuse me? So there's no tracking, there's no record. That's terrible. There's no policy failure issues. You know, an officer can go out and do something and do it absolutely by the book, and it turns out disastrous because the rules they were following were not well written. The policy wasn't good. So a citizen can make a complaint And the CRC right now has to say, officer didn't do anything wrong. But the policy needs to be addressed, and there is no way to address policy failure in this current model of the Citizens Review. We've got a lot of work left to do. Please pay attention, show up. Please, please listen to Joanne, show up, pay attention. And if you remember what I said about the union contract and no annual reviews, that was a police officer who brought that to me. Officers want change too. There's officers out there who are not happy, and they can't get it from within the Bureau. You need this outside independent review for all the citizens in this room, but every officer who wants to do a good job and doesn't have anywhere to go, they need this too to get the change they want. This serves both sides.
Thank you. Mr. Podanki.
There are there's lots of unfinished business in the changes that were made on March 31st. Commissioner Leonard recognized that, the council recognized that. There will be a task force meeting over the next 90 days to come up with additional changes, and I believe all of us are going to be involved in watching that process.
I think the Independent Review Division, the empowerment of the recent ordinance was a great first step. It is a tool, but it is only one tool. There's no credibility presently in the city in reference to a citizen filing a complaint and having that complaint go through the procedure and having it resolved. I believe that the independent review ordinance will help that process, but there's still a lot more work that needs to be done. Joanne spoke about one of the things the AMA Coalition is dealing with. We want to change the state statute. We want to review and change the policies and the training by the Portland Police Bureau. We want a special prosecutor that will only handle police cases of excessive and deadly force. We want an independent Justice Department investigation, but not only an investigation, but an audit of past patterns and practices of the Portland Police Bureau. There are many things that need to take place, and it's going to take the empowerment of you as citizens, because I want to remind, as I remind the commissioner every time, in our cities across this country, it is not unemployment that starts rise. It is not in terms educational issues that start rise. All of them play in the factor. But in every city that there has been a riot, it's been an incident between the police and a citizen, because the citizens feel that there's no accountability, there's no fair treatment, there's no equity. And we have an opportunity to prevent that from happening in
Rob, my hat is off to Commissioner Randy Leonard for being the brainchild of the new city ordinance. I look at the police department as a wall, and a wall that had many cracks in it. And the recent murders by the police have begun to make that crack grow. I see this new ordinance as a step in putting a wedge into that crack and to bust open the police code of silence. I do not believe that the Albina Ministerial Alliance Coalition is going to go away. I know Tajafa is not going to go away. And I know certain angry members of the community is not going to go away. So where this ordinance has started the wedge, the community must get behind us to help us to put that wedge deep in and eventually break open the code of silence. Bottom line, I have not seen a tree stump that when you put a wedge in it and you chopping it up for firewood, that it was not broken. Yes, you can get some stumps that have a knot in it, and it just takes harder. We have a stump that have some knots in it, but knots can be broken. So I look at this, and yes, I'm optimistic that it's going to happen. There is going to be a change within the Portland Police Bureau, and it is coming, and it is coming soon.
We're on our last question, and I'm going to ask the panel members if you can answer this question with that. Okay, if you could, please. What words of encouragement do you have for those police officers who are consistently doing the right thing and put their lives and safety on the line every day to serve and protect all of us? Also, now is the time to make any closing comments to the audience.
I would say to those officers, we appreciate you and your service, and we applaud your efforts and consistency of doing the right thing. We encourage you to rise with us and to help us to connect to those, to help us correct the ones who do wrong and bring the shadow over the department to be eradicated by doing that which is right. We want to stand with you to break the wall down of bad treatment and retaliation by fellow officers and command staff when you speak out about issues and concerns within the Bureau. To the beloved community, we all must join our hands. We must raise our voices that enough is enough, and we demand accountability. Together we demand that justice should be for all people. We want that bad, bitter root of those officers who are not doing right must be removed, or else it will spread bitterness throughout the whole department and indeed throughout the city. Together, we must ask for justice. Together, we shall ask for justice. And together, we can have justice. And this is for the relay, my friends. This is not a sprint. We are not going away.
Well said. Thank you.
I would say for the officers who come to work every day and do their job and do it in a way that's respectful of all community members, good job. However, you have a responsibility for those officers who are not doing a good job. You know the ones that are abusing people in the community, and you have a responsibility to hold them accountable. If not publicly, then at least behind that blue wall. It is your responsibility to make sure that people are treated with respect and dignity. As far as next steps, as has been so eloquently stated, most of us have been doing this work for a lot of years, and we're not going away anytime soon. But let me tell you something that may surprise you. Nobody pays for police accountability work, but I am here to tell you that the community pays severely when there is no accountability, when there is no oversight, and when we do not hold police accountable for how they're engaged in our community. And so one next step may be to become a fan of AMA Coalition for Police Reform and Justice. You can find us on Facebook, and we'll keep you informed as to what's going to happen next. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. TJ.
Very quickly, the officers who are doing their job, I just give you my heartfelt appreciation, and please, please, please let me know anything I can do to support your efforts, because we'll be pushing from the outside if you'll push from the inside. And advice to officers, the most powerful weapon that you have does not rest on your hip. It is between your ears, it's in your heart, and it's your value system. The most powerful weapon that you have and you use every day is your communication skills in your mouth. Please use those first, use those wisely, and we hope you don't have to use the others.
Thank you. David.
I also want to express my appreciation for all those officers that are trying to change the culture of the Police Bureau from the inside, that are working hard and under great stress at times because of that culture. I want to urge them to get together with their fellow colleagues and elect leadership for the Portland Police Association that is as committed to changing that culture and changing police policies to work better, and to also work for transparency inside the Bureau. One of the Oregon laws that needs to be changed is the law that provides that all material related to disciplinary actions of police officers, whether or not any discipline ends up being taken, is that all of those records are exempt from the Oregon Public Records Law. That does not help support officers that are doing the right thing.
Dr. Hank.
I would like to say to those officers that go out every day and are professional, responsible, and ethical, that first of all, I ask that you continue to do what is right. Be public servants first. Break the code of silence when it jeopardizes you and the whole Bureau. Don't ask gang members to break the code of silence and when something wrong is done, and then you keep the code of silence. Embrace the concept of community policing. Understand that we cannot deal with the issues that are before us without a partnership with the community. And then continue to be respectful to everyone.
Thank you. Mr. Osborne.
To those police officers out there who are doing their best with honesty and integrity, I thank you, I thank you, I thank you, and I mean it from my heart. But you also have a responsibility for when you know wrong is being committed by your fellow officers to snitch. We want gang members to snitch on each other, but we don't snitch on each other. How can you call yourself being my protector, and when one of you all do wrong and you hide it, you're just as bad as those who did the actual crime? So, I encourage you good police officers, do me a favor, snitch to Tajafa, and I'll see that things get taken care of. We need a snitch in the police department. I thank the audience for being here, because each and every one of you that have stayed throughout this session shows that you care about your community. And again, I thank you, I thank you, I thank you for coming.
What a segue, huh? What a segue to wrap things up here. And I just want to reinforce what the panel members said, and that is thank you. None of us are getting compensated for being here tonight. We're doing this as volunteers to get the message out. And I'm glad that you recognize that, because that shows you're intuitive, and that shows that all of us have hope. But I want to thank the panel members for being here. They didn't have to be here. They chose to be here. And Portland Community College did not have to support the Criminal Justice Department in putting this on. They chose to, just like all of us. And you, the audience, I think it says a lot about you being here tonight. And remember what it says, all of us. And where do you recognize we, the people? Come on, political science majors. Right on. The Constitution, the Constitution. We, the people. Okay. You had your public service announcement, and I heard what you said. And let's remember what George Santayana said, a very renowned person. He said those who cannot learn from history are what? Doomed to repeat it. Doomed to repeat it. May I continue, please? Public safety, would you please do what you need to do, please? And I want you to remember, because this is not a spectacle, people, never forget those who have died or been abused from police misconduct. That's what this meeting is about. And always ask questions. Always ask questions. And never be afraid to hold our police and government officials accountable. Thank you very much, and have a good evening.